Hi, this is Remembering the Past with Corey Franklin, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. Tonight we're going to talk about one of my favorite actors, a great actor and a great guy, and the guy who wore his baseball cap backward before it was cool, Jack Klugman, who died recently at the age of 90. His life changed when Ethel Merman spit in his face, but we'll get to that. And to start out, let's talk about what his friend and longtime co-star Tony Randall said about it.
The quality of his acting. He's such a fine actor. His commitment to the part, to any part he plays, is so total that it makes everything he does seem terribly important. He doesn't act. He's really in it there.
Tony Randall and Jack Klugman were superb together. They were also great friends. Tony Randall worked with the best, so he knew what he was talking about. And somewhere there's a drama teacher who once told Jack Klugman he couldn't act and he should be driving a truck. And if that person is still alive, they should be really embarrassed. Jack Klugman was a nice Jewish boy from Philadelphia. And after he got out of the Army in World War II, he had a little trouble with bookies. He owed them some money. That's life imitating art. So he split Philadelphia, went to Pittsburgh, and then ultimately New York, where he took acting classes. That's where he was told he should be driving a truck. He roomed for a while in New York with a guy named Charles Buchinski, a.k.a. Charles Bronson, and he got his first big break in one of the classic movies from the 1950s, 12 Angry Men, about 12 jurors in a murder trial. Jack Klugman was the last surviving juror from 12 Angry Men, which included some great actors including Lee J. Cobb, E.G. Marshall, and the star Henry Fonda, who helped Jack Klugman out a lot. Interestingly enough, he also helped Larry Hagman out, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, so he must have been good to young actors. Here's Jack Klugman explaining to Henry Fonda how a switchblade works.
Oh, I hate these things. Did you ever see a knife fight? You? No? Anybody here ever see a knife fight? Oh, I have. You know, my back stoop, a lot across the street, backyard. Switchblades came with the neighborhood where I live. Funny, I never thought of it before. I guess you try to forget those things.
How do you use a switchblade?
Well, you never use it like this. See, you lose too much time switching hands. Here's how. Underhanded. Anyone who's ever used a switch knife wouldn't handle it any other way.
Are you sure?
I'm sure. That's why they made it open like that.
You'd say the boy was pretty handy with a knife.
Mm-hmm.
You think he could have made the kind of wound that killed his father?
No. No, he experienced. He'd had all his life handling these things. I feel he'd have gone for him underhand.
He did a great job there, and you'd think his career would have gravitated towards movies, but it didn't. He was in The Days of Wine and Roses, where he did a good job. He played opposite Jack Lemmon, who was Felix in the movie version of The Odd Couple, little coincidence. But Jack Klugman's career in the late 1950s and early 1960s was steered towards Broadway, which we'll talk about in a minute, and television. He did a great guest turn in the legal show The Defenders, which starred E.G. Marshall, his co-star from 12 Angry Men, but he gained his biggest attention because he was in 4 separate episodes of The Twilight Zone. The only other person who was in 4 episodes of The Twilight Zone was Burgess Meredith. Probably the best of the 4 episodes was one called A Game of Pool, which is sort of an existential takeoff on The Hustler, where he played with Jonathan Winters in a rare non-comedic role. Jack Klugman played the Paul Newman Eddie Felson character who risks his life on a game of pool.
No, you mean insanity. Risk my life on a game of pool?
Insanity, if you prefer. I'm just a pool player. There's probably no less important thing on the face of the earth. But mark this in your book. I'm the best. It's a proud thing to be the best at anything. But then you wouldn't know about that.
Well, where are you going?
I'm going back.
Wait. You say I don't want to be the best bad enough, but you're wrong. Oh, boy, are you wrong. Do you know how many hours, how many years, how much of myself I put into this game? How many nights I slept on that table right there? Yeah, I did that. I made a deal with the owner so I could practice after the place closed. I haven't been to the movies in years. I haven't dated a girl, read a book, because it would take time away from the game.
Still talking, nothing else.
I'm good, mister. But am I that good?
Well, you'll really never know until you're ready to risk everything.
Look, will you stop pushing, huh?
You know where I come from? There's a race driver. Go to the track and whisper his name. Say Tazio Nuvolari, and watch the heads nod up and down. Or go to a bull ring and hear them speak of Manolete. Both men face death daily, and both are legends. You never make the grade at anything by playing it safe.
There's TV dialogue you don't hear anymore. But Jack Klugman's life changed with his big role on Broadway. He played opposite Ethel Merman in Gypsy. We've talked about Gypsy before. When we talked about Arthur Lawrence, and we talked about Ethel Merman before, when we talked about Ernest Borgnine.
Wherever we go, whatever we do, we're gonna go through it together. Wherever we sleep, if prices are
sleep cheaper together.
Whatever the boat I row, you row.
But you won't.
Okay, so we'll acknowledge that Jack Klugman couldn't sing, but playing opposite Ethel Merman was a big deal, and it was important later in his career. We'll come back to that. He also was an understudy for Walter Matthau in the original Odd Couple on Broadway, which is sort of coincidental. But we're going to jump ahead to his TV career again. In 1976, he starred in the prototypical medical detective television show, Quincy Medical Examiner. Some say it was based on the LA coroner Thomas Noguchi, but Klugman said that while he admired Noguchi, it was not based on him. He was sort of a prototype for the crime scene investigation shows we have today, with a little bit of Murder, She Wrote thrown into it.
Gentlemen, you are about to enter the most fascinating sphere of police work. Let me give you a lesson in anatomy. Yeah, how you going to justify pumping that kid full of lead if it turns out he isn't the one who killed that girl, and I don't think he is?
It was a well-plotted, well-paced show, and he used a dramatic background to best effect.
How did you hurt your arm, Doctor?
You wouldn't believe me if I told you.
I might.
All right. Some strange-looking creature in black attacked me on the deck of my boat.
I believe that.
Oh, do you? But you also believe that your husband was murdered?
Murdered?
That's right.
You believe that?
I know it.
You sound so sure.
I stake my life on it. I'm probably doing just that.
The police, they know who killed him?
Yes, they do, and I think you know, too.
But I wasn't even there on the set when he died.
But you do know about Dim Mak, don't you? When I came here before, you were doing some exercises behind that screen. Would you show them to me again?
I was doing Tai Chi exercises to rid myself of tension. My husband had just died.
Not died. He was murdered by somebody who knew the same moves.
Are you accusing me?
Well, you did want him dead, didn't you?
I was his wife.
But not his only woman. I'm sorry, but it happens to be common knowledge. Common enough maybe to drive you to do something drastic like murder. That's what I'm going to tell the police.
Jack Klugman took his role on Quincy very seriously. He wanted to promote social causes, which is something I think he picked up from the television dramas he worked in the 50s, where the writers often did that. And he actually made a big difference once. In the early 1980s, he took up the cause of orphan drugs, drugs which are used for rare diseases, which often don't get funding from the pharmaceutical companies and need federal help. He filmed an episode of Quincy which was written by his brother, who suffered from a rare disease, and he actually testified before Congress. When the legislation was stalling, it was his push through Quincy and through his testimony that got Congress to pass the legislation which permits funding for orphan drugs today, and a lot of people have Jack Klugman to thank for it. He had a great quote in his testimony. He said, "We're not talking about orphan drugs, we're talking about orphan people." So in some sense, Jack Klugman was a real-life medical hero. But let's get to the meat of the issue. When we talk about Jack Klugman, we're primarily talking about one thing.
You in this game, Billy, or not? Yeah, I'm in. Oscar Madison presents his new tomato surprise. He thinks I can kill you.
That's right, The Odd Couple and Oscar Madison. In 1970, Gary Marshall had the rights to The Odd Couple to adapt the Broadway play and movie for television. He selected Tony Randall to be the Jack Lemmon Felix Unger character. Tony Randall wanted Mickey Rooney to be the Oscar Madison character. Gary Marshall wanted Jack Klugman. He had his sister Penny Marshall, who later went on to play Myrna, Oscar's secretary in the show, approach Jack Klugman, and Jack Klugman, after a couple of slow years, was interested. He asked Gary Marshall whether it was his being an understudy to Walter Matthau on Broadway that convinced him that he could play Oscar Madison. Gary Marshall admitted he had never seen Jack Klugman as Oscar Madison on Broadway, but what he did see was he saw him opposite Ethel Merman in Gypsy, and Ethel spit all over him while she was singing, and he figured if he could handle that, he must be a good actor. Okay, brief discussion here of Oscar Madison. A lot of people have played the character. Probably the most notable is Walter Matthau. I'm going to go on record as saying Jack Klugman is the best Oscar Madison ever. He's better than Walter Matthau. I'm sorry, you guys out there who like Walter Matthau. Part of it is the off-screen relationship between Tony Randall and Jack Klugman. They were such good friends. But what Jack Klugman did with the role is he created a more three-dimensional, sympathetic Oscar than Mathau's. Klugman's Oscar understands Felix. To a certain extent, he sympathizes with Felix's neuroses. He actually enjoys being with him when Felix isn't bugging the hell out of him. In that respect, we understand Oscar better. We understand his neuroses about gambling and messiness there, but for the grace of God, he might be Felix. There's a love there that Klugman creates that wasn't in the play. He'd ask for a love scene in each episode. Even though you understand why Klugman's Oscar wants to throw Felix out, you root for him much more, because on some level, he really does love Felix. The Mathau-Lemon relationship is probably much truer to the characters that Doc Simon created for the play, and in fact, Doc Simon didn't like the television version of The Odd Couple in the first couple of seasons. He grew to like it later on. I think there's a case where the actors, Randall and Klugman, added to rather than detracted from the author's original intent and made it better. Personally, I think after the first year, when they opened it up to a live studio audience, it was a little slow that first year, but after that, it was the most underrated sitcom ever, and it's easily in the group of the greatest sitcoms ever. You can see how deft Jack Klugman's Oscar is in putting down Felix in the episode where Felix is afraid to fly, one of the greatest sitcom episodes that was ever filmed. Ranks right up there with the $99,000 question.
Welcome aboard Flight 62 to Houston. We will be flying at an altitude of 32,000 feet, arriving in Houston at 10:30 Central Standard Time. This is a pressurized cabin. If at any time we should lose our pressure, an oxygen mask will drop down in front of you.
May I try that, please?
Oh, sir, this is only a demonstration.
I know, I want to practice with you.
Sir, that won't be necessary. Just hold it over your mouth and breathe normally.
Yes, but I can't breathe normally. I have a sinus condition.
Sir, as long as you have a nose and a mouth, it'll work for you, too.
Sarcasm. Certainly inspires confidence.
You inspire sarcasm.
The beauty of one line. Here's another line from that episode.
What is it? Those men on the ground under the wing. What are they doing? They're mechanics.
No.
Something's wrong. They're pointing up the wing. They look so worried. I can read his lips. I much fear serious trouble in the fuselage, Frederick. Help me, what's the other guy saying?
I much fear there's some nut trying to read your lips.
What's the matter with them? They're running away. They're running away. Why don't they? No, because they're afraid. I'm coming, Fred. I'm coming.
Of course, Felix gets trapped in the aisle by a fat lady. Here they are trying to negotiate a parking spot in New York City with parking attendant John Biner in one of his funniest roles.
Can't wait 4 years.
What do you got under leaky pipes? Puddle?
You take the note of sarcasm.
Be that as it may, there ain't a garage space within a 100-block radius of this place. In fact, most of my openings are inherited.
What should we do?
Check the obituary, follow up leads, persevere.
Come on, let's get away. Wait. There must be a better way to handle this. How from $10? Will this get us anything?
Sure, 2 5s.
We're not getting anything.
There must be some way.
All right, let's put our cards on the table. How high you guys willing to go, huh?
The limit. What the sign says, $50 a month.
Pay no attention to the sign. It's an old sign. Last card I could in for that had a horse in front of it. Now, how would you feel if the sign said $250 a month?
For $250 a month, I can get the car 3 rooms and a bath.
All right, I tell you, I'll give you one for $200, and that's the same rate I gave my mother.
That's not too high. Can't you do any better?
Well, how's it going to look if I give you a better rate than I give my mother?
You shouldn't charge your mother.
Don't say anything about my mother. Let's keep personalities out of this. It's a business.
Felix, what do you say?
I say we'll park on the street.
Oh, yeah, where do you live?
74th Central Park West.
Central Park West, 32% bus stops. The rest is 1 hour parking. 7th Avenue, Broadway, no parking between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. 75th Street, you got your school zone, no parking. You got your church on the corner. 74th Street, alternate side of the street parking. You got to move your car every morning at 7 a.m. You want to hear about the east side now?
We've never met a guy who's so much about parking.
Hey, parking's my life. Give me a street, I'll give you an ordinance.
What do you say, 7 o'clock? We can do it?
Think so?
It's better than paying blackmail. Good day, sir.
Go ahead, try it on the street for a while. This'll be back. This'll be back begging on your knees like my mother was.
Jack Klugman was primarily a foil in that scene, but I don't think that Walter Matthau could have done it any better than Jack Klugman did. They had several episodes where Felix would cross-examine Oscar, and in this one, after Felix cross-examines Oscar, Oscar cross-examines Felix. Again, a deft performance by Klugman.
I should like to call to the witness stand my key witness and co-defendant, and incidentally, a heck of a guy, Oscar Madison. What are you doing? Take the stand.
This man is a co-defendant. Anything he says will be judged in that light. Why don't you allow Miss Olam's testimony to speak for itself?
Is the bench cognizant of the import of its remarks? Do you think Mr. Oscar Madison would lie? He's a reputable man.
Proceed.
Thank you, Your Honor. Now, Mr. Madison, state your name, please.
Oscar Madison.
Famous sports writer. Now, Mr. Madison, would you tell the court, in your own words, of course, exactly what transpired on the aforementioned evening in connection with the alleged scalping of the alleged ticket?
I had this extra ticket. My roommate Felix Unger said, why don't we return it to the box office, which he did. Now, he didn't come back to the seat. I went out to the lobby to see what was happening. He was being arrested. Next thing I knew, I was being arrested, too.
And you're leaving out the most important part.
What's the most important part?
Mr. Unger, we'd all like to hear.
Tell them how you couldn't get a date. Yes. Mr. Madison, will you tell the court why there was an extra ticket?
Can I object?
No. Only your lawyer can object.
Answer the question, Mr. Madison.
I refuse to answer the question on the grounds that I don't want to answer the question.
You're ruining my defense.
Well, okay, you can ruin my life.
Answer, Mr. Madison. I have killers patiently waiting their turn.
I had an extra ticket because I couldn't get a date.
What's louder, please?
I didn't get the answer.
I couldn't get a date.
Ah, and how hard did you try?
I tried very hard.
How many girls did you call? We didn't hear you, Mr. Madison. Seven, you count?
Your Honor, may I speak for myself, please?
Any other voice would be refreshing.
May I put this man on the stand?
I'd love it.
Take the stand. Take the stand. I want to prove to the witness that
You mean to the court?
See, Budinsky. No, I mean to the witness.
How messy it is back.
Forget it. I want to prove to the witness that he's responsible for it, and he owes us all an apology.
If you could do that, I'll cancel the fine.
You got a bet. Mr. Unger, when you went to grammar school, what was your nickname?
I don't see
Answer the question, please.
Felix the Pest.
Huh? I didn't hear you. Louder.
Felix the Pest.
What did your high school yearbook say about you?
I was voted the boy most likely to interrupt.
And when you went to a marriage counselor, what happened?
He kicked me out of it. He wrote on my chart, lunatic.
And what were the specific grounds for your divorce that set a legal precedent in the state of New York?
Pestiness. My wife swore under oath I was a pest.
Defense risk.
Another single def put down in the Let's Make a Deal episode.
Do you want to keep your squid and the message that's contained herein?
Mm-hmm.
But if you don't, I'll give you back your $800 and a $200 bonus, and then you'll have $1,000 in cash. What do you want to do?
Keep the squid.
Ooh, Jacques Cousteau?
And another one of the greatest episodes of all time, the password episode, where you'll never think of Aristophanes the same way again.
The password is bird. All right, Felix, you have the option this time. Pass or play? I'll play, Ellen. 10 points. Aristophanes. Greek. 9 points, Millicent.
Canary. Bird.
You got it! Aristophanes. Everybody knows Aristophanes wrote a play called The Birds.
Everybody does me. Would you stop being so perfect, Felix? Will you stop it? I will lose it here. Now, come on. Let's go get together.
Why do you think I'm giving you these great clues?
Great clues? If Charlie Chan had these clues, he'd be running a laundry. If we don't listen to me, we're going to lose this entire game that we're being queen. Now, this is important. I want you to give me good clues. No more Greek clues. Aristophanes is ridiculous.
Okay, back to the game. And the word goes to Oscar Madison, Betty White with a score of 17-0. This is the word.
The password is ridiculous.
All right, Oscar, you have the option. Pass or play.
I want to play, Alan. Now, Aristophanes.
Ridiculous.
That's Jack Klugman's Oscar Madison. He created one of the great characters in television history. I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer, Sid Tepps. Close tonight is another song from Gypsy with Ethel Merman and Jack Klugman. It contains my mother's favorite line from Gypsy, Rose, I love you, but don't count your chickens. Here's a little bit of You'll Never Get Away From Me.
You'll never get away from me. You can climb the tallest tree. I'll be there somehow.
Oh, Rose. Rose, I love you, but don't count your chickens.
Come dance with me.
I warn you that I'm no Boy Scout.
Relax a while. Come dance with me.
So don't think that I'm easy pickings.
The music